6 o'clock, so let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. And first thing we'll do is call the meeting to order. And is there any excused absences that we should be made aware of? Okay. Can we have a roll call?
Yes, sir. Member Benguesa?
Here.
Member Olvera?
Here.
Member Beneke?
Here.
Vice Chair Lemasters?
Here.
Chair Cooley?
Here.
Treasurer Janetti?
Here.
Councilmember Carroll?
Here.
Mayor Martinez?
Here. Right, thank you. Mr. Lee Masters, lead us in our pledge of allegiance.
Absolutely.
Guess I could add you, huh?
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the approval or any adjustments may be necessary to the agenda. None? Okay, and then we need to, are there any conflicts of interest that need to be disclosed tonight? Do we have any public comments that have
No, sir.
been requested? All right, so let's move on to the action items. The first one's the adoption of the minutes from our last meeting, which was on 9/9 of this year. Any discussion on those minutes?
Move to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any opposed?
I abstained. I was not present for the meeting.
Okay, then it passes. And the next item is the August financial report, and we should have a staff report on that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. One of the things I will say, and y'all will be happy to hear this, is this is probably the last monthly financial report that you'll be getting from me, because we have Jeff, our new finance director, who is here with us, and so he'll be taking this load on from this point forward. So we're
That's the best news I've heard today.
I know, and the Phillies won. No, they didn't. I'm sorry, they're not in the playoffs, are they? I'm sorry about that. So, overall, we're very early in the fiscal year, and so if you see our financial reports, they are still kind of tracking as we're part of the year. We have a lot of revenues that are deferred. For example, our property tax revenues don't come in until really we get towards December, January. We'll start to see some major revenue coming on the general fund side. One of the elements that we do see is a $5 million payment that came to the city pursuant to the new waste management contract. So that's a one-time payment that is coming in as reported on the general fund side with regard to the fees that we're collecting. The plan would be to work with council to repurpose those funds over into the capital fund. So we want to be able to use that for other specific capital projects. Don't want to roll that into recurring revenue since it's a one-time expense, one-time revenue stream. The city also had some additional debt service payments that we need to make. So on the revenue streams, you'll see a negative on some of our revenue streams. That's because, again, we've moved some funds over. We have debt service allocations we had to make there. So outside of those issues, we are on track, and at this point, there's nothing to point to that would be a concern or any other kind of anomaly that's out there.
All right, we'll receive and file those.
Again, on the taxes, we receive 2 payments a year.
Yes, sir. So you get your first major installment, which comes in right around January, I think, and then your next one comes in March or May. Yeah.
Do we need a motion, Mr. Chair?
We're going to receive and file. Do we need a motion on that? Okay. Can I have a motion?
I move.
A second?
Second.
Any comments? Anybody who's opposed to receiving and filing those? If not, then it passes. We'll move on to the next item. Now, the next item is the list of the council-assigned tasks. And as I recall, last meeting, we sent all the members home with a charge to look at these items that are listed. There are 6 of them here, and give some thought as to which ones you believe that you may be able to help with, which ones you might like to help with, and report back. And so that's what we're doing. We're just going to open it up at this point in time. So we want to develop a CFD training program for local realtors and develop a frequently asked question for the city website. And Anna.
So I searched on our wonderful Google, and there's this website called CaliforniaTaxData.com, and it's everything from the beginning of Mellaroo CFDs to why they get paid, why they got started, how they're taxed, how they're distributed. I mean, it just gives you everything from the beginning to now. And it would be nice as like maybe to do like a hyperlink and add it onto the city's webpage. And if people want to look it up, click on it and it takes them there, and it explains from the beginning since 1915 Act.
Is it concise enough that somebody could pop through in just a moment or two?
Okay, and my only question is, that usually if it's .com, it's a commercial website.
Right.
And .org is a nonprofit type website. So, and this is just the first question that comes to mind. I don't know the answer to this. So I would at least want to make sure that there was nothing on it that was incorrect before we tried to lean towards putting it forth as a link on the website. So that's the first thing that comes to mind for me. Although, I'm so glad you found that as a resource. I think that's great. But that's the only caveat that comes to mind. And, you know, maybe it's totally harmless and perfectly accurate, and, you know, maybe we could even put it in the document for the, for potentially training local realtors too, as a great reference point. But that's the only thing I'd want to make sure we were careful of.
There's another one also on the treasurer, the county tax collector.
Mhm.
They have their own also, but it's like,
That's true. So that should be part of
Okay.
so maybe a
the
hyperlink
people who are
to the county of
developing.
Riverside. That's more, you know, but
Yeah.
something like that.
The other thing is too, the city does also have resource documents too, that we could do, you know, potential reference to. So, depending on which direction we take this, if it ends up to be like a 2-person team that does the research, let's say, on that and brings it back to the finance and audit, and I only say that because that's what we did with the state controller's report. Actually, it was a 3-person team, I think. And we did that with some other things so that everybody didn't have to get involved in every component of the item. Those would all be good resources for them to, as part of the pulling together of an evaluation of
I'm just
information.
thinking more of like, you know, the newer generation, especially me too. I like to just click on hyperlinks. I don't want to be searching and digging
No,
through.
that's true. I agree.
You know, it should be very mobile friendly where people can just click on a link and be able to just go there if they have questions.
Yeah, I don't search either.
I think what I'd like to see, and give me your input, is maybe half a dozen to a dozen slides on like a PowerPoint that gives the real basic information. There's a bunch of baloney out there right now that's floating around about the grand jury looking at Mellaroo, CFDs, and there are people have this concept that they want to know if their realtor, that the grand jury wants to know if their realtor told them that there were Mellaroos. And there's a concept that they're gonna go back and tell the grand jury that they weren't told, and so now they're never gonna have to pay them, you know? That's so fallacious. You know, they got the information, it was all there when they closed on their documents, they're there. If they had a bad realtor, well, that's sad, but it's not gonna get them out of being responsible for them. So I think something just really simple, basic is what I'd like to see, and I'll defer to you guys about what kind of depth you want. I think the links are fantastic, but I think something that just boom, 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 here it is.
I think it'd be interesting to see, and I saw the grand jury items that they said the realtors weren't notifying. People were saying they weren't being notified about Melrose. Do we know what the local realtors do with that right now? Do they have anything? Are they giving links and leaving it for granted, or are they just burying it in the stack of papers you have to sign? And in there is a thing saying you're responsible for Melrose. Because if they have something, we need to see what that is, instead of reinventing the wheel. And maybe it'd be important to know what's the most critical information elements that people need to know about Melrose. We don't need to make them PhDs in Melrose, but they need to have a basic understanding as a homeowner of what it means, what my obligation. And I don't know what all the questions are, but that way, I'm looking at developing a training program for realtors that could be converted into something for a handout for them to give to prospective buyers, or when somebody buys, here, understand Melrose other than signing a document with a lot of fine print.
Yeah, I think that's what we're looking for, and maybe the first place would be is contact the Board of Realtors and see if they have any.
What are they putting?
Are they? Yeah. Are they
And
doing any training?
If it's lacking, in that's where we could provide, well, the links or a little training program and give them.
Do we have anybody who would like to work on that?
Well, let's discuss this further. I have a big problem developing a training program for realtors. I don't think it's the city's responsibility, to be honest with you, to develop a training program for realtors. Realtors have a host of attorneys, board of realtors, individual realtors. They cover themselves, okay? The problem's not that the information's not there. The problem is that the information doesn't get communicated to the prospective buyer.
But
I'm not saying all the time, but from what I'm hearing, people say, it's in the fine print. Everything's in the fine print. Nowadays with real estate, when I bought my first house, it was like 5 pages. Now it's like 50 pages. That's how litigious that whole industry has become. I don't think we need to train realtors. I think, they're aware of it. We need to probably make them more aware that that's a concern of our community, and they need to better explain what Melrose is.
Maybe it's a misnomer training program, because I wouldn't call it a training program, but maybe we need to have a meeting with them and a discussion, a workshop, because Beaumont got picked out as being one of the offenders of Melrose, but then the realtors there, so we go hand in hand with this thing. The realtors aren't doing their job. Who gets the brunt end is when the tax bill comes in and people keep questioning the city, like we impose something on them.
Well,
It's there. So I think we're looking at some kind of a relationship to say, are you doing your job up front? What do you need to do there, as opposed to, you're right, a training program?
Yeah.
The information's available. I question what is the right information they need to be handing.
Yeah, I would bring in several, maybe 2 or 3 brokers in the area and just get some input from them. Find out what they do, if anything. How do you handle this problem?
I would think they're under the hot
The
seat
city
right
manager
now.
has a comment.
Yeah.
I think
Todd.
one of the things that's important to note is it's not the realtor's responsibility to provide the notice. It's the seller's responsibility. So that's either the original developer who's selling the lot for the first time or every subsequent homeowner. So the objective in hearing council discuss this, it wasn't to say we're going to go train the realtors. The idea was to orient the real estate community on the status of Beaumont CFD program. So that way they're aware, hey, this is where we have the CFDs and here's what the status would be. So we can let people know, here's what the assessments are, here's what the process is, so they're aware of what happens where. What gets confusing is the CFDs are comprised of three basic components in Beaumont. You have a facility piece, which goes back to provide funding or reimbursement for the capital infrastructure for the project. And then there's qualifying elements to that. The second is ongoing municipal services, and that's an additional amount assessed that helps cover the service impact that's created by the new population or new folks that are coming in. And then the third is a public safety element. So in some cases, you may have only facilities and general services, or you may have all three. So the new public safety one is something that was just implemented and started just a few years ago. And so it's helping people understand and then look at what those rates are. And then how those rates are set up. These are not ad valorem. These are flat assessments that are land secured and kind of walking through. A big confusion in the community is this is like a credit card or a mortgage payment. It's not. It is not. And so it's not real easy just to go through and look at what is the balance that's left over. Because we have debt obligations that may be incurred. We have ongoing service expenditures which are going to be incurred. And then there's different factors that go into establishing how those rates are assessed and how they're paid. And so there's some work like that, I think, which was to try to orient the realtors on here's what the program is, here's the key elements of it, here's how it works, and here's kind of the timeline of when you can expect things to come online. So I think that's really kind of what we're talking about, not to teach them how Melrose works or to teach them what they're supposed to do or not supposed to do. The notices are specified in state law. So the actual content of the notice is specified, and you must be compliant with that.
Absolutely.
But there's, in all caps, there's a minimum type specified in the statute, the bottom two paragraphs, and one big, in bold, all caps paragraph says you have a right to terminate that contract within 3 to 5 days, depending on how you receive that notice. If it's hand delivered to you at the time that you're doing closing, you can look at that and see, okay, I still have 3 days that I can cancel this contract. If it's mailed to you and you get it, you've got 5 days that you can actually cancel that contract. And that's said in black and white specifically on that notice. And then our policies, our goals and policies that we had established for the city of Beaumont in 1995 actually say that. And that specific notice is actually mandated in that goals and policies, and it is verbatim taken out of state law in terms of what is and what must be included in that specific notice. So it's working through there, making sure that people understand that. I have seen that CaliforniaTaxData.com site. It's good data. It's good information. 'Cause I double-checked that against statute, against our policies, and it's very consistent. It is good information. So I'd feel comfortable if we wanted to let people know that's a resource to go look at. And so that really is a nonprofit kind of tax advocacy group that's looking and making sure that California taxpayers are as informed as they can be. So it's good work, I think. So.
Okay, so I think maybe
Good to know.
maybe we're misstating what we want to do or develop. I think what we want to do is develop an awareness program, if you will, about what CFDs are in place in Beaumont and how we administer them.
How about a video? I mean, things go viral all the time. How about a video explaining CFDs? If people don't want to read it and click on the hyperlink, then how about a video? A video that you post on your page that gives a quick explanation as to what it is and people can share, and then that way it travels through the city. You don't have to read it. If people are, don't want to read, they can listen.
I think what Todd just explained would answer 90% of people's questions, just the way you explained.
Yeah.
Just the way you explained it right here to us would answer 90% of people's problem. I mean, if that was on a video, you could hear it in 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes.
Yeah.
So let's jump from there. Do I have one or two members who are willing to work with Todd? Because we're not going to lay the whole thing on Todd. He's got plenty of other responsibilities.
Can I give 2 reminders here? One is, I, by the way, agree at the direction of being more precise in our language on what it is that we're trying to achieve here. I think that that's critical to hitting the target, that we do that, because I have never felt that it was, as Mr. Beneke pointed out, a good approach to consider training people who might be gone from move tomorrow and somebody else comes in, and somehow or other when you step up, you then are responsible for this continuation of this training and being aware of all the changes in personnel and things like that, and that is too much. So I think that's good on both of those points. The other thing is, remember, we're not the last word on this. We're going to come up with our guidance, so to speak, on each one of these items, but then it goes to council. We don't really have the authority to step in front of council and say, you know, we decided we're going to say this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. We need to come up with the best answer that we can to get the objective met, and then it's going to have to go before council, am I correct, for their review? So, so we don't want to go so far down the path on being precise on every detail that we're going to assume the council's going to go along with this. So that was why I was thinking that maybe the direction of having, let's just say it, for simplicity here, 3 people who think that they're going to not only enjoy but be very good at item number 1, they come back to the committee, this committee, with what they think is a good approach, and they meet maybe and discuss among the 3 of them what they think is a good approach on item number 1, and come up with, because otherwise we can get into the discussion of the details of item number 1, let's say, forever. And remember, we're still going to have to resolve it first as a committee and then bring it to council. So if we had a subcommittee that came up with what their best recommendation was for item number 1, and then they brought it to this committee, and then we had discussion based on their fact-finding, their discussions among themselves on what was reasonable, what had good structure, what they thought was a good approach. Then they bring it to us and we put it on the agenda. This is just a suggestion. And then the rest of the committee gets to say details of it. And then we've got a final approach we want to take to council and say to council, do you agree that this is what your objective was when you told us that we should go do this? Does this fit what you thought your vision was on it? And then if they say yes or tweak, then we can finish it up. Because otherwise, I'm just kind of worried they're going to get, we as a committee, because we all have so many good ideas, and we all really care about ending up with this as the right thing, we're going to end up too much in the bowels of every one of these, with so many of us having different approaches that we're never going to launch the rocket.
Yes,
I'd like to take a step back. It was about 2 months ago where we as a committee said we thought we had more to offer to the council as a suggestion. We came up with a list of just broad topics, grants and CFD things. The council then reviewed it last month, and they gave us, they were interested, and they wanted to explore these areas. And my intention, and I wasn't here last month, was that we were to look at these and, one, see what kind of a recommendation we could make. I mean, training program, maybe that, it wasn't right, and I see that being discussed now, but that should be, this subcommittee should be doing that. And then we should make a recommendation. We don't have to lay the whole thing out, we just refine these things. And I don't think we're gonna recommend all these at one time. This is a whale, you take it a bite at a time. And I was looking to prioritize what we think we could do most impactful in an order, and maybe do one of these 2 and go to the council and say, here, we frame this up. Here's this thing on CFDs, we frame this up. What do you think? And we present that. Then it would go back to be developed if accepted, and the same with something else. But I don't think we need to do all 6 of these at one time. I think we're biting off more than we can with the 10 people we have here.
Right.
Or 8 people.
right.
Not unless we get a pay increase.
Yeah, well,
That wouldn't be hard. I can find a dime in the hall.
Or something?
So you know, like where we go today, this action we've taken is kind of like what I would have guessed the subcommittee would do. We're not really gonna train realtors. We get it framed down to say this might be the best approach that we can
A
provide.
video may come out of that
Yeah, the
discussion.
video, the tactic of how you execute it
Right.
is gonna come out of that, but right now we need to say, what is it we're trying to accomplish? That the council says, that would fit our plan. Because, you know, we're not gonna implement it until they give us a go.
Mr. Giannini, this list right here is the prioritization that the committee established. So
Right.
one of the things we did at the last meeting was to go through that list,
Okay.
and then they prioritized these by a very elaborate and amazing vote system.
Yes,
So-
yes.
See, these are still very broad topics.
Yes.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we need to get them down into, you know, a morsel that we can accomplish something with.
That was kind of what I was thinking when I said maybe 3 people that feel like this
That was
is
right
their
behind.
strong point should do that sort of offline discussion and then bring it back, and then when it's ready to spiff off and send to council, we do, and we say, what do you think? Do you want to tweak it? And then we know what the target is.
So the question I have then is, what's our intention as far as the list? Do we want to focus on one, throw around some ideas, let the subcommittee go and come up with some further parts of that? Or do we want to tackle a couple at a time generally and make subcommittees on
Yeah,
2?
I think the first thing we need to do is decide which ones we feel comfortable that we can actually do something with. And, you know, when we're looking at evaluate security of the city of Beaumont's telecommunication systems, is there anybody here that feels comfortable that they have the skills to do that?
Well, that was sort of my little suggestion, so I can speak to what it was that my objective was for that. My objective wasn't that and I don't think any of us can second guess a lot of these items anyways. But, so I didn't approach it with that we're gonna second guess what the IT department is doing. I didn't approach it with that. What I was thinking was, we do know that, for instance, the city of Banning had a breach in their security. So I thought that as the Finance and Audit Committee, because security is now so closely connected with your data, your ransomware, things like that. So I thought if we had IT come speak to us with the city manager on what it is that they see as what they do now and where they're headed in the future, then we would have had some oversight on it in terms of the security and the integrity of the city. I didn't see it that we're gonna say, well, why are you buying a Cisco router? Why don't you buy a whatever?
Well, I think, but we also were looking, our initial pass was things we thought this group had the oversight or the ability, the skill sets. We have a variety of skill sets here that we'd be able to give some valuable input. And I'm looking at that, and I don't know everybody's background. I don't have a background in that. I thought we were trying to keep it. We don't want you on the subcommittee, though. We want to.
No, but I'm just saying, and if I do, somebody else may have a
Yeah,
little
well, I'm
more
saying
knowledge.
if we did,
I agree with you. I don't know. I speak for myself. I do not have any expertise in that area. However, I'd like to know the information.
If something happened and we had never even asked the question, would we feel somewhat responsible that we had never asked the question? That was kind of where I was coming from.
I agree with you.
Not that we're gonna be able to stamp, well, let me tell you how to do it better. I didn't
Well,
really
see, that's-
think we were gonna
I
do
agree.
that.
Okay.
defining that a little better than looking like we're questioning whether that's the right programming, it's the right security. You know, you're saying evaluate the security of the city of Beaumont's telecommunications. Really want to evaluate the security as it regards to our finances and our funding and everything else. Are we
It's all
unbreachable?
connected. If they can,
Well, I mean,
Yeah, it's all
just trying to get it more
Okay.
specific.
yeah. it's all
Okay, so, we've jumped down, not doing these sequentially, but we're down at number 4, and I think we've had an excellent recommendation and a proposal of how we handle this. And so are we at this point now that we work with the city manager and see if we can agendize a report back from IT as to the overview of what they're doing so that we can hear what they're saying and okay, yeah, we
Think the
understand
council-
what they're doing and
think the council
it
is
makes
correct.
sense.
We're responsible. We're responsible. When we read the policies and procedures, and we say, these are good policies and procedures, and we give our feedback and we let them go with it. Underneath those policies and procedures are basically policies and procedures for changing passwords, from turning off accounts when people leave the company. Those are things that are just as much an integral part of policies and procedures that protect the integrity of the city. You don't have to be super technical to have the common sense and the logic to be able to read a report from IT and say, okay, but you tell me now, what are your steps here to make sure when somebody leaves that you've closed up shop for them? And IT can tell you. And we should know that. If we're giving a vote on approval of those policies and procedures, we need to know, we need to not take an old-fashioned approach where like it's, okay, so you count the money and then you walk across the floor, that's okay. The big danger sometimes comes from things that are a little bit more newfangled.
I understand it's an issue with you. I'm looking at, as a group, when we did this, we talked about things that were in our, our strong points. We talked about grants, investment policy, cash handling, the CFD question, financial statements, and assist in the RFP process. They were the 6 that we had discussed. I'm just saying, I don't see, I see it's all an integral part, everything ties together. I'm looking at this group and the strengths that they presented on what they thought could be a help. It's not everything, obviously there's a million other things that can be done, but this group here was looking to be able to help with their backgrounds in those areas.
Although one thing you gotta remember too is one thing that everybody brings, and that's just another pair of eyes. Another pair of eyes as a resident is that type of a committee that we've formed here, so that we can look and maybe see what council missed, or have an insight as a resident or business owner, without having to necessarily have any technical experience with it. So everybody qualifies on that.
Depending how an RFP is written, this is not something that outside auditors would never look at. A lot of RFPs would be considered an internal control, and I've seen them come up before in outside audits, and I agree with that concept that we may not be IT or security people, but common sense to these procedures, to these policies makes sense. And not that we're experts, but at least somebody's looked at them besides the IT department and the city council, and I don't see any issue with that. We're not saying that whatever we figure out is going to be perfect, but the council can then relay, or the information's there, that these were looked at by a citizens group to see if they made logical sense on the face. And I think it's one we can do pretty quickly, as long as we can get IT to agree to come in and give us a quick overview of what their policies and procedures are and where we go. And we can move forward.
My only question, Chairman, is that we're on number 1, and we've skipped down to 4.
Yeah.
Which is probably not the correct order we should be following.
That's
So can we
absolutely
wrap up
correct.
1 and see if we want to spend the rest of the time with 1, and then see if we're ready to tackle 2? Because that is a priority list.
Okay, I would agree. So number 1, is there anyone here who has an interest and would like to look at that and throw out ideas and come back with a little suggestions or some concepts of how or what might be a good way to run with this? Anna, yeah, I knew you were going to volunteer. Richard?
Good job, Anna.
I would
I got out of
I would
hold.
work on it if I can get together with Todd.
Well, I think that's a given, and realize we're not going to throw this burden back on Todd. He's got
No, I don't
enough
want
to
to
do,
burden him with it, but
but I'm sure you're willing to give a little bit of time for it.
Absolutely.
So,
Did you raise your hand?
No,
Okay, good.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if I
I
called.
Okay.
did not.
Okay, wasn't
Thank
sure.
you for clarifying.
Okay,
Holding it down.
so can we have Anna and Richard there and coordinate with Todd? And what kind of a time frame do we want to set on these? I know council expressed last week that we didn't want these to just drag out forever. And it'd be something we can at least agree as to where it should go forward in a short period of time. Council, Mayor.
Well, I'm looking at our council agenda here to see what we got. Well, first, let's back up real quick. Before I answer that, I want to have focus for the subgroup, the subcommittee.
Okay.
So they're tasked with developing this idea, this awareness program that is realtor focused, realtor friendly, that is bringing up an awareness of how the city's doing things, not necessarily the actual CFD themselves, but what is it that we're doing here in Beaumont so that they're aware, so they can pass that on to the prospective buyer. And at the same time, are we also looking for if this is suitable for website posting? Whereas the realtor can always say, if you want more information, go here, or pamphlet, or whatever they decide that they want to mull over. And therefore, you're looking at it from a realtor focus and from a consumer focus. Is that correct? Did I get it right?
That's my concept.
Okay.
Anybody?
All right, so I just wanted to get that straight. Okay, well,
Okay, so do we need an action on that?
we're getting time frame.
Okay, so we need a time frame. What's a realistic time
Well, let's
frame?
ask the manager, because he's got a plate load of
Yeah.
stuff to do. Now, remember, he can always assign also a delegate.
Right.
and a designee
Well,
if he
the good news is, Mr. Molenkamp is very well known for doing financial videos and online training. So that's good. So.
I think, personally, I think we could do this, we could have a report back to you by next month, in the next meeting. I don't think it's gonna take that much, to be honest with
That's what I was
you. I mean,
saying.
it's gonna
Yeah.
take a lot of discussion, but I think we could put a
Yeah,
package
you're
together.
not gonna do the
We're not gonna
actual,
rebuild the
yeah.
empire.
Right.
So, yeah,
Yeah, we're not gonna build the Empire State Building.
That would be the fourth.
What do you think?
You're gonna come back with
No.
a workable
End
strategy,
of year?
and if they like the strategy, then you'll.
End of year? You've got budget going on too?
Well, that's another thing too, but see, he can always,
You have audit
Give
and
it-
budget going on, that's all. Well, I mean, not,
the only
all.
thing we're contemplating is this is a hard time for him right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we've got a workshop coming up and so
Um,
forth. But
And
I think they can hash it out though, if
Yeah.
it's just a, because he could give them directions and they can go and work on it. He's not. gonna
right.
do it.
You're not gonna put together this program. It's the concept of where we go with it, and we pretty much tied it back down to what CFDs exist in the city.
We're not gonna come to you with a video next month.
No,
Right. No, we're just gonna come with
No,
ideas.
We may come with you an idea of making a video.
Right.
Well, I
And
make
so,
a motion that Richard's on the video.
Wearing that shirt, I like it. All
Wearing
right.
that shirt.
So really, next month you would present to this group
Our
your
idea.
concept and strategy of that.
Right.
And the committee can say, look, take it to.
Take it or
Right.
refine it or go back
Or
or
refine it
whatever,
or-
perfect.
Right.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
So I
Is
I
that
think,
too short
Is that
a
too
time?
short?
Yeah.
What it sounds like is we're probably gonna sit down and do some initial brainstorming and come back with a outline,
Okay,
a
good.
Right.
general outline of where we're going, which then will be to get some direction from this full committee.
And you may want Jeff to be
Yeah.
the finance director, Jeff
I'd
to be
like to
involved.
have him there.
Yeah, yeah, so that he can kind of pick up where you,
That's, yes, ma'am, that is my plan.
That's your plan, okay.
Okay.
He's all darn it, this was my
okay,
plan.
so do
All
we
right, Jeff.
need an action? We need a vote? It's
Nicole
just
said no.
insight, okay. So then let's move to number 2. Number 3 is pretty darn clear. Assist with the request of the RFP for the independent financial audit services. I think it's important we do that quickly, and I'd be willing to sit on that. remind me the new finance director name? Jeff, okay. And obviously Jeff's got to be involved there. And I think it's a matter of pretty much know, Todd's office should pretty much know what we've looked for in the past, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and just an overview of what we think needs to be touched on this time around, what maybe we had the past group doing that doesn't need to be done. I think that's about the extent of this. When's that RFP, ideally, when should that be out in the wind and being floated out there?
Well, we'll be finishing up this year. We're on schedule to have you guys look at the draft report in January, and city council to look at it in February.
Okay.
So we should be out to RFP very soon thereafter. So I would say by the end of this calendar year, we should have the RFP really wrapped up and ready to advertise.
I'll work on that with
Okay.
you, Jeff, and myself.
Okay, so Barry, myself, and Jeff, and with a presentation back that we've done it, that we've accomplished it, or whatever, by January 1 meeting?
We did talk last time, although we didn't specify it, about looking at the RFP process overall in general, not just specific to independent financial audit services, but just the RFP process.
Right.
But this
But-
might give us one to work with, right?
Yeah, this give us one to work with.
Yeah, I wanted to work with.
That's
that.
not been
And I wanted
agendized,
to say
so-
that, because I think that's very important. I know, I've worked in cities, I know cities can lose a lot of money by messing up their RFPs.
Yeah, and, bring that up when we get down to future items. Okay, so
Does the council approve RFPs, or is it just the manager? I'm just saying, in the process, we're talking about doing this thing and sending it out. I mean, do we have a stop here with the council that they look at the RFP?
Yes,
And
the
we want
council.
to send it out by the new RFP?
I think we wouldn't want to send it out until we've got our current audit effort complete. So I think once that's complete, then we can send it out, so.
Do it at the end of the year, or
Yeah.
and then we can present it to the council?
Yeah, first part of January, and,
Protocol here.
okay. So that's number 2.
I would just add to that, just prior to that meeting, if we may have like a quick 5 or 10 minute review of what an RFP is, just for the whole council
Yeah.
and for the public as well.
Yeah, so,
Unless you want to do it at that time, I don't know, but
Okay.
I just thought it'd be kind of nice, just to remind, what's the timeline, what do you do, how many people do you,
yeah, I'm going to put that down on the future agenda.
the process.
We'll discuss it then. Okay, so number 3, evaluate the city of Beaumont's investment and financial policies. Obviously, Barry, you're involved there. Jeff will be involved there. Is there anybody on our committee that would like to just look at those with them?
Yeah, I'll volunteer for that.
Good.
Okay? So we're going to have Jeff, Barry, Thomas, and pronounce your name for me. I'll do it wrong.
Just call me Bill.
Okay, Bill, great,
There you
okay.
go, made it easy.
Yes.
It's not fair, though. I mean, you earned your name,
No, it's
we
okay.
need to pronounce it.
Okay. Number 4, I think what we hashed around, I think what kind of the decision was is that we would like the IT department to do a short staff report to us explaining what their policies and procedures are, and perhaps even drop a copy of that in before the meeting where they would present that. And so just as citizens, people that are familiar with looking at some stuff, we would look at it and just give back our opinion to the council. Is that basically what we've decided we should be doing? Okay.
I don't know that even opinion, but to say that it's been explained and that we were
Right.
able to ask questions and understand that the policy was being followed through on. That alone, because council's never going to have the time to go down into this unless there's a need to. So if we say that we've had that report and we've reviewed, we had discussion, we made some suggestions, I think is enough for the council to say that we've done that. And to, give our collective input as a citizens committee.
Can we have that done in group here and have them come and present to us as opposed to a subcommittee?
Yeah.
I think the more eyes on it, the more
I think
questions
that's
we'll have.
fine.
Yeah.
I think that makes the most
I,
sense.
yes, I would agree. Todd, do you have some concept of what might be a reasonable time frame for IT to be able to address this? And
Yes, we can task them with making a report to you at your next meeting.
okay,
Okay.
okay. Then number 5, develop a
Shall bring your
process.
sleeping bags too.
Yeah. Develop a process for grant reporting. Okay. I am not sure that that's probably worded the way we want. I think we've had some comments that some of our members think that we might be missing some grants because we haven't jumped into it. So I'm not so sure that we really want to develop a process for reporting so much as identifying grants, identifying a way for the city to try and apply for or determine if the city even wants to apply for something.
Well,
Input.
I know we have ongoing grants. You got your block grants and things, various things going on there for law enforcement stuff. I would like to know what we do as a city and what currently we do, what maybe have we done in the past that was either successful or not successful, and where the future opportunities may lie for different funding sources through grants. And at some point in time, there may be an opportunity to, I know cities, a lot of cities, of course, are a lot bigger than us and have a lot more financial resources, but they actually have grant writer, grant person on staff that does all the research and fills out the grants and lobbies for them and does everything else. So, not that I'm suggesting that, but I mean, I just like to know that the whole process, I think we'd all like to kind of know where we're at in regards to what we do in the city for grants and what current grants we do have coming in that are funded.
I suggest we put that perhaps in a staff report to us in December.
Yes.
Okay, November's kind of
Yeah.
filling up, but December
And-
would be a good idea to have one of the staff members come up and just give us a general, this is what we've done, this is what we do.
Well, I think maybe a report with regard to, because there's a lot of grants. I mean, there's a lot of money coming in through alternative resources today. One of the challenges to say, well, what do we want to pursue is a question of what are we trying to accomplish? And so, that's a very, very involved discussion, at that point. So this is going to be a multi-step. I'm concerned, we've added a ton of work here, and so I'm really concerned about being able to generate something this detailed that quickly. So,
But I wasn't asking, I was just asking for just what do we do, period, not where we've gone or what we want to pursue, just so that they understand that there are different levels of grants and that, just kind of a general, not a detailed report, just so that they understand.
I'm not sure our committee should drive as to what kind of grants we should be, that the city should be seeking.
That's a
But I think the
priority thing.
Our committee would like to understand what process, if any, the city currently has to go looking for them to try and identify them. And it'd certainly be up to the council to decide which types we would want to look at. And for Richard, when you have federal grants, there's a special audit that's done. It's called the Federal Single Audit. And they go through and check to make sure that whoever's receiving those grants is handling the money properly and following the processes and that. So the city, or anybody who seeks a grant, basically what it is they have to identify it, they have to have somebody who has the skills to write the grant request so that it meets the requirements. And I think what we're looking for is, what is the city currently doing? Do we have something in process for that? I think that's more what we're looking for.
It's low
right?
priority, you wanna push that.
That's what I was saying, we're not gonna attack this whole
Yeah.
list
No,
tonight.
no, it's
Get out.
not a high priority.
We would need to know,
Push
and
it.
if you're overstaffed right now, maybe overworked.
Yeah.
We need to understand
It's not
what you have going here. We, at our meeting, said, we think there might be some opportunities, maybe some other eyes out
Right.
there where there may be some other grants that we could pull in. So
And-
I would say, let's hold on to it a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah,
You want to hold on to it, or just want to
Yeah.
tentatively schedule it for March or April?
You know, you can always pick June or July even.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 6 months, no, that's 7, 8 months away. And you can always move it closer if things end up where there's more time. My thinking initially on the grant reporting is, yes, the thing that drives me crazy about grant reporting, and people do this in line at the grocery store to me, they'll say, well, I heard about this grant, why isn't the city getting this grant? Well, you know, and I'm sure that staff hears that all the time too, and sometimes from city council. But, so, even once a quarter, if we, in our quarterly reports that we got, if there was like a staff report on what the progress on what grants we were pursuing and, you know, what we had planned maybe for the future for pursuing other grants, because, you know, we are gonna be marching towards compliance on the financial reporting anyways. So I don't see a need to push this into March, because you're gonna have audit reviews
Including all
coming
that.
up, you're gonna have all sorts of other things during that period of time. And every time we make these suggestions, there's staff that gets chewed up behind that. And staff has to make sure that they're doing their best priorities. And we're not gonna, this committee's not gonna manage the direction of the city manager, that's council's job. So, you know, by all means, let's make sure we put our eye on the ball with the things that we do need to give approval of, which is to follow the audit, the budget. Those things are all gonna come back to us.
So I like your comment on that. I propose that we push this back to June. Okay,
June 2020?
2020.
2020, right.
and actually, if I could ask you to July, because
Okay.
July 1's the beginning of the fiscal year,
know.
so,
That's
June,
right.
July's better.
yeah, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I can see it just
June
dragging
is
a
a
lot
killer
of,
month.
Right.
Well, and as we're pursuing things, we're looking at things, we can begin to note those and kind of extract, you know, some information, you know, so we'll be working on pulling stuff together for you, you know, between now and then. So we won't be sitting idle, we'll be working to that
I'm sure
objective.
that Jeff's here, because he knows that's on our radar, so he could be.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
The last thing on here is develop a financial training public for the, or program for the general public. And, again, this isn't critical, it isn't something that needs to go on. I would be willing to take it upon myself to go out there and look and see what's out there, what we might be able to adopt, a simple little system that we could get with no cost. I think there are enough nonprofit entities out there that do this exact type of thing. And again, let's push this back to July. Anybody not happy with that? Not, okay.
Well, we're actually fulfilling a part of that by doing the CFD training program. That's part of
Right.
financial
Yeah.
training.
Mr. Chair, I'll just add that I've been involved in this at other locations, so if you want to pick my brain, I can.
Okay, yeah, I gathered that from our interview with you, and I think that's a lot out there. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to pull something in that's
It is something
concise.
citizens
Right.
So semi-annually was.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's 4 tasks here that we've undertaken. Something new for us as a group to do. Let's see how we perform on this and work through the bugs on being able to come in with something credible that the council can make a decision about.
Okay, and we can go from there. All right, so the next item is future agenda items. Nicole, do we have anything that's hanging on from a prior meeting that we need to talk about? Or are we just looking at the ones that we were talking about putting on the agenda today?
Not that I have with me, I can go back and look at my notes and see if there's anything we haven't addressed yet.
If I can speak to one thing, Mr. Chair, I think Richard brought up in the last meeting wanting to be able to receive reports regarding CFD allocation on a biannual basis. So that's kind of hanging in the air.
That was a recommendation. I think council discussed it or looked at it. I don't know what the outcome was on that, but yeah, I mean, I'd like to see that happen. I think it's a good idea.
So this is an agenda. You want to talk about it the next meeting? Is that what you're thinking? Or you want to
Yeah.
just ask, I mean, I don't know that we can just ask for it because it really hasn't been on the agenda, but I think if we put it on the agenda,
Yeah,
we
that's,
could have
We'll
that
put it on the
discussion.
agenda, yeah.
that's the direction I'm going.
So,
I
yes.
think that's good.
Okay. Anybody, any more discussion? Everybody agreed that we'll ask for that to be on the agenda to discuss what we'd like to see, what we think is important.
Reporting process for the
Yeah,
CFP
reporting
to this
process.
committee.
Okay.
Also, we'll have on the agenda and Richard's initial thing for the
CFD.
Yeah,
Yeah.
CFD.
yeah,
program.
yeah, our subcommittee will report back on number 1.
Okay.
Okay, and, okay, finance director comments.
I'm brand new, so I won't take too much of your time, but I appreciate you having me here. It's going to be an interesting journey. I've just started at 1 week under my belt, so I don't know much yet. But fortunately, I have great staff, and I hope by next month to be more up to speed, and then, in months to follow, maybe I'll become a little bit of an expert. Thank you for having me.
Well, on behalf of our committee, let us just say that we're tickled pink to have you. I've spoken with you on a Skype interview before and seen the resume, and we're looking forward to good things and feel real comfortable that a good decision, good choice was made. And we'll help you get settled into Beaumont, and I'm sure any one of us would be glad to share with you whatever insight we have.
Because I need to learn the lay of the land here.
I moved here 3 years ago from a big city in another state. Very, very seriously, if you have a question or something, ask me, and I'll tell you just how things work that I was thrilled with. My wife absolutely loves Coke Slurpees when she's got a cold. She asked me one day, she said, I need a Coke Slurpee. There's no 7-Eleven in this town. So I told her I'd go find one. I drove down, I saw 2 of our police officers sitting how they tend to sit. I pulled up behind them, stepped back and said, hey, got their attention, walked up, and one of them said, oh, I recognize you. And I said, I'm going to ask you for a favor. It has nothing to do with anything in the city. I'm trying to find a Coke Slurpee. And I know you guys out driving around all the time know where it is. Boom. They sent me right over to the AMPM, the ARCO station. Yep, I got Coke Slurpees. My wife's thrilled to death. So, I think you'll find that kind of attitude everywhere. And anybody I've approached in the city and asked for anything, they've been only too willing.
It is amazingly beautiful around here. The mountains are, I'm looking forward to exploring. So.
Yeah, and I've not explored enough, but there's some amazing things. We spent a day last weekend up in the apple orchards, which blew my mind how close they are. So, yeah, there's a lot of fun things.
Yeah, not that this has to do with anything, but kind of pivoting off of what the chairman said. It's not just, city officials and, sworn peace officers who have that attitude. When my wife and I moved here 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, we were struck by the quality of the customer service we ran into everywhere we went in the city, and it caught us off guard. And that was, I had already kind of fallen in love with the city. My best friend had lived here since 2002, and he and I would like go play basketball every Saturday, and so I fell in love with driving here. And that was just something that struck me when we moved here, was the quality of, well, the people that we encountered. So.
We're really excited to join you, so thank you.
Good. Okay, so the next item is the treasurer's review report to council.
I want to thank everybody for the input. One, to start the process that we've been discussing tonight, to take some initiative. I've been on committees before where people kind of sit back and they're on the committee, but I like the initiative and the ideas. It really, I appreciate it from my standpoint. I will just report back to the council on next Tuesday that we have started the process, and we prioritized the tasks and picked on 4 of them that we're going to start addressing, and they will start to see our recommendations over a period of time.
Okay, I think that concludes it, and so the meeting will be adjourned at, 7:03? And our next meeting is scheduled for October 7th.
No,
November. Oh, I did read that, so, good. Okay, November 7 is correct. Somebody look at the calendar.
November 4th.
4th. Okay. So, next meeting is November 4th, and again at 6 p.m.